Perfect. Comme vous pouvez le constater, il y avait trois caractéristiques importantes. La première est qu'il s'agit d'une initiative communautaire. La deuxième est qu'il est participatif. Les membres de la communauté sont une partie active du processus. Ils décident de ce qui est mesuré et organisent les données. Et il est également orienté vers l'action. Il est réalisé à des fins d'apprentissage et d'amélioration.
Thank you. Are we ready to set up Paul for the interpretation already?
Yeah, I will add him.
Great. Eric, if you'd like to go off mute and share, if you have a reflection on COMEL from what we've learned so far, please go ahead.
Thank you. Can I speak in French?
Yes, you can. Is it on now, Sarah?
It should be on.
Do you want to tell anyone? Yes, I see. There's an interpretation button at the bottom of your screens. If you click on that, you can click on the English to make sure you hear everything in English, including when people speak French. Or you can click on French to always hear French, including when people speak in English. Sarah, will you just let everyone know? And then Eric, over to you quickly.
Merci beaucoup. Je suis Eric, je suis coordinateur national du REJA. Le REJA, c'est le réseau des ONG de jeunes en action basé au Burundi.
I'm so sorry, Eric, just to interrupt you for 1 second. Do we have, Paul, are you on interpretation yet?
I see Paul talking, but Paul, you're actually muted. If you just unmute, I think will work.
And then Eric needs to be on the French channel. So.
Yes. Okay, great. Eric, please go ahead.
Merci. Je disais que donc, je suis Eric, je suis au Burundi. Je suis coordinateur national du réseau des ONG de jeunes en action pour la paix, la réconciliation et le développement. Do I wait the translation or can I go ahead? Je voudrais... Ah, merci. Merci. Donc, je voudrais donner une petite expérience de ce que nous faisons dans la communauté, dans le domaine de la consolidation de la paix. Nous identifions au niveau de la communauté ce qu'on appelle les acteurs clés de la cohésion, composés par les leaders communautaires, l'administration, la police, les organisations religieuses, donc les personnes, je dirais, les acteurs clés au niveau de la communauté qui peuvent contribuer pour préserver la paix et ils constituent ce que nous appelons un cadre d'échange permanent. Et au niveau de ce cadre d'échange permanent, la communauté identifie les défis à la cohésion, c'est-à-dire tout ce qui peut compromettre la paix et la sécurité. Ils font la cartographie de ces défis et ils élaborent ce qu'on appelle un plan d'action-réponse autour de ce qu'on appelle les réponses collaboratives. Chaque membre de ce cadre d'échange permanent au niveau de la communauté s'engage à faire une action qui va contribuer à la résolution de ces défis. Et nous avons au niveau national une base de données où les incidents basés sur l'identité qui risquent de...
Thank you, Eric, so much for this, and we'd really love to hear more about your organization. We'll have time later in the call to speak more, but I just want to make sure to introduce our colleagues from the Philippines who are joining us since it's late on their end.
OK, merci.
Thank you. I'm very sorry to interrupt. Sarah, we can go to the next slide.
Mais c'est bon, merci.
Thank you. So to recenter us in community-led monitoring, evaluation, and learning, one big difference between community-led or CLD congruent monitoring, evaluation, and learning and other forms of monitoring, evaluation, and learning, or MEL, is that it's not extractive. The community not only has the power to decide what is measured, why, and how, but they also own the data and the results. If you remember from previous sessions, for those of you who were there, what we have on the screen is the MEL cycle. And in co-MEL, community-led MEL, the community has a voice in every single one of these stages. I'm not going to go into all of them now, but in today's session, we're actually going to look at how these two organizations support communities throughout the whole co-MEL cycle. This call today is a little bit different than the previous ones we've had. The previous ones have been deep dives into different parts of this cycle, and we've co-created ways to implement each of those stages. The last two calls focused on establishing the theory of change, what you're trying to achieve with your programming, and setting learning questions and indicators, which is defining what you want to learn about what you're working to achieve. Today, we'll have a special focus on the third step in the cycle, on data collection. That's collecting the information to answer those learning questions. But we'll also be hearing from OPI, Outreach Philippines, Inc., and Outreach International on how they've worked to support communities throughout the whole cycle. In fact, they just worked with a community to, as far as we know, for the first time, publish a journal article in which the community itself is the first author. And you can see a link to that in the chat box also. I will put that in there now. So we're really excited for them about that groundbreaking piece of research and authorship that they have supported. Today, as we said, they're going to take us through the entire cycle that you see here. They'll highlight the data collection part of the process. They will introduce us especially to one methodology that they've used for data collection. And we hope that by listening to examples from the Philippines, it will spark ideas on how to do this amongst all of us. And later in our breakout groups, we'll discuss some of the different data collection methods that we use in monitoring, evaluation, and learning, and how we can adapt them to be more community-led. Sarah, next slide. So this slide here is from an earlier session on MEL 101, where we looked at just the foundational concepts for monitoring, evaluation, and learning. And today we're going to be touching especially on the two terms that are highlighted there. I don't know if anyone wants to share the definitions for those. And I think, Sarah, there's some people having some trouble hearing in the chat box, if you can just check in with them. Does anyone want to share on what qualitative or quantitative data is as far as they consider it? Again, that can be in the chat box or raise your hand. If not, Sarah, the last slide before I hand it over. Thank you. So we will define these together then. But as we just mentioned, data collection is the part of the cycle where the community gathers the information it needs to answer its own learning questions and indicators. So we have to ask ourselves, what tools can be used to do that? Essentially, this information or data in MEL terminology is often two kinds. Quantitative, that means think about numbers. This is data that can be counted or measured, like the number of births or deaths or weight or percent of female students or percent of malnourished children. And then we have qualitative data. This is information that we gather from all of our five senses. It's observational. It's like stories or images or sounds and things that are much more difficult to measure, at least in numeric number terms. So these are a couple important terms for us as we go through the rest of the call today. And we just wanted to go over them in the very beginning. And with that, I will hand over to our colleagues and we can switch slides. Thank you all for bearing with us, also with the translation, and we will make sure that anybody who can't hear try to support you. Thank you. Over to you guys.
Thank you so much, Nelly, and thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. If somebody could give me a heads up to say, or thumbs up to say that they can see my screen. There we go. Thank you very much. And I'm going to present. There we go. So again, just thank you from our side, Outreach International and also Outreach Philippines Incorporated for this opportunity. It's always with great delight that we collaborate and also work with our community within the movement for community development. It's always great to be with you. So my name is Eileen. I'm the Director of Research and Advocacy for Outreach International. And then with me are my very esteemed and very experienced colleagues from the Philippines. And I'm so privileged and honored to be here with them today. That includes Nancy Bobadilla, Agnes Carlos, and Juanjo Gonzalez. All three of them have among themselves an excessive amount of experience and also expertise when it comes to community-led development. So I learn from them on a daily basis, and I soak up everything that I hear from them, and I'm so glad to be here with them. Why are we here? So Nelly did introduce and give you background on that. Just to summarize, we want to share with you from a practitioner experience what it is that we do when we facilitate community-led monitoring and evaluation. And to that end, we will show more explicitly to you and introduce you to the ways that we have used qualitative methods for data collection. For us, it has been a journey, a wonderful learning journey up until now, and we continue to learn through the process. And so we are very happy to share some of those learnings with you. I work for Outreach International. We are based in Kansas City in the US, and we partner with nonprofits across the world, 8 of them to be exact. One of them is Outreach Philippines. Agnes and Red will reflect a little bit on the communities that they partner with within the Philippines. Santa Lucia Old is the community that Red works in and that Red supports. And then the second community that you will hear a lot about is Santa Monica. And Santa Monica is the community group that Agnes is supporting. Both Agnes and Red started their work in these two communities in 2023. So they are very, very new and young community groups. But as you will see, they are not scared and they are proactively engaged in community-led development. We are very, very excited to see where their journey will go. If you want to learn a little bit more about OPI, who they are and the work that they do, on the screen you will see 2 QR codes. One of those codes will take you to OPI's website. I do encourage you to go and visit their website so you can learn more about the amazing work that they do. And then the second QR code will take you to their capacity statement. And then you can see a little bit more in depth and in detail the work that they are doing and also some of the publications that they have produced as a result of their work. So I'll just pause there 2 or 3 seconds so you can get those QR codes. right. Good. So that's all about us. And you have also introduced yourself in the chat box and continue to do so. It's wonderful to learn and meet all of you in the chat box. We do want to just pause a little bit and hear from you why you are here. We know why we are here, and we think we know why you are here, but we just want to confirm. And so share a little bit more with us why you are here, and specifically what it is that you hope to gain from this session. To that end, we are going to use Mentimeter. If you haven't used it before, it's a fantastic and a really engaging online platform. The way you can access it is just scan that QR code, and that QR code should take you to Mentimeter. Alternatively, on your phone or on your computer, you can go to www.menti.com, and then you enter that code 44795956. Alternatively, if you don't feel like moving into the Mentimeter world, which is completely fine, you can just add to the chat box and we will monitor that. I basically want to know from you, why are you here? What is your justification, your rationale for joining us this evening and this morning or this afternoon to learn more about methods of data collection? What is it that you want to get from this session? So why are you joining? What is it that you want to get from this session? So I'm going to get out of this screen so I can take us to Mentimeter. And then don't worry, you will see the code on here too. I'm going to present. There we go. So we have 3 responses already. Fantastic. You will see the code is on here too, 44795956. That's great. To learn more about community-led practices and knowledge, that's great. I'm interested in how to make parts of our work more community-led. That's wonderful. To appreciate the importance of and what it takes to facilitate call mail and data collection. Yep, wonderful response there too. Interested to learn practical examples of community-led monitoring evaluation. That's a wonderful contribution too, and we are hoping that we can satisfy that request from whoever uploaded that, because I want to learn more about the experience of other organizations. Yes, we are very happy to share with you those experiences, to hear concrete examples. That's great. And let's see what is going on in the chat box. Sarah, maybe you can help me if there are French comments. That'll save me from Google Translate. All right, any other responses? I'll give 30 more seconds. Need more clarifications. Oh, here we go. As a USAID funded cooperative development funded implementing partner, we are extremely community-based and motivated. That's great. So naturally, monitoring, evaluation, and learning should be that too, even though oftentimes others forget. Yeah, it is always, it's not straightforward to do community-led monitoring evaluation. And so learning about that is always good, and exposing yourself to how others are doing it. Good. All right. Well, that's very good. Thank you very much for all of these contributions. And I will take us back now to our slideshow. Okay, good. So I want to hand it over to Nancy now. But before I do want to emphasize the following. I'm so happy that Nancy is with us, because what Nancy is going to share now is at Outreach International, our basis of what community-led development is. Because for us, to facilitate community-led monitoring and evaluation, you cannot separate it from your methodology of doing CL work, because those two are incredibly closely connected. And so what Nancy will share is going to give you a foundation to then hopefully understand on an even deeper level how and why we are doing community-led monitoring evaluation the way that we are doing it. So in other words, I'm so happy to hand it over to Nancy now to share a little bit more generally what it is that we do when we say we are doing community-led development, which then sets the stage for us to introduce how we do community-led monitoring evaluation, including how we collect data. Okay, Nancy, handing it over to you. Nancy, you muted?
Sorry. I'm sorry, I muted. I did not notice. So sorry. Again, thank you so much, Helene. And good evening, everyone from the Philippines. Again, my name is Nancy. Okay, and so from our first perspective, community-led development is an approach to development that prioritizes local ownership. So this applies not only to decisions about what should be done, how, where, or by whom, but also to how those decisions should be implemented and then managed. So for us at Outreach International and Outreach Philippines, in addition to facilitating such ownership, we also prioritize perpetual learning. Here, we are not necessarily talking about skills development, but it is about transformative learning and increased processes of internal motivation and self-regulation. So we want to cultivate among our participants an awareness of their own learning and ownership. And then alongside such ownership, we believe emerge positive changes in terms of agency, efficacy, and capacity. So we do this through a natural and perpetual learning process, which in the Philippines we call participatory human development or PhD process. And in doing this, we focus on three major strategies. So first is issue development. So we support communities in addressing their issues of poverty, and we have a set of activities geared towards that. And then second is project development. So we support communities in turning their issues into solutions in the form of community-based projects. And we also have a set of activities focused on that. And then third is organizational development. We want to ensure that communities implement those projects, whether they are focused on like food security or water and sanitation or livelihood development. And for that, groups need some organizational or social infrastructure. And we have also activities specifically geared towards that. And through all of these activities, we are supporting communities in elevating their learning, becoming aware of their capacity as people, their ability, agency, and self-efficacy. And this is a repetitive process that includes knowing their situation, analyzing, deciding, and planning, and then acting, and then evaluating, and then reflecting on the results and impact of the actions or interventions. And in each activity people participate in, we make sure that the people are consciously involved, meaning they are interested and aware of the need to be involved. So for us, this 5-step natural learning process is very important because it is not only about doing activities. We want participants to be actively aware of what they are doing, learn from what they are doing, and then use that learning to improve their future activities. So we believe that by naturalizing and absorbing this process, people gain a deeper level of learning and of course a greater sense of ownership over their learning and the activities that they are participating in. So for us, community-led development means supporting communities through different set of activities to address their poverty-related challenges through activities they plan, implement, and manage themselves. It also means supporting them in active learning by doing experiential learning, and monitoring and evaluation is no exception. So what we do in our community-led work, the principles we're following when facilitating that work will then naturally also apply to our approach to monitoring and evaluation. So this means when people do M&E activities, it is not only about them doing those activities. It is also about them being constantly aware of why they are doing those activities, for whom they are doing those activities, and in the process, strengthening their capacity in doing those activities. For instance, in facilitating community-led project development, our field practitioners work consistently with community members to facilitate the development and establishment of projects that they think are the best solutions to address their identified poverty issues and needs. For example, Red and Agnes will later share an example of such an issue and its corresponding project. In this case, food insecurity and corresponding rice loan project. This is the case for both Santa Monica and Santa Lucia O. We make sure that the project recipients recognize their ownership over the project they developed and implemented. How? By ensuring that they are involved in the implementing the community-led M&E process. And the steps of such a process can include, number one, review of the issue and the project goals and objectives. And that includes developing the overarching evaluation or research questions. Number two, identify and develop data collection tools or survey. Number three, pre-testing or role-playing data collection. Number four is actual data collection. Number five, data encoding and formulating data summaries. In the case of quantitative data, this can also include accessing the summary report through an application. And then number six is data analysis and validation. And then number seven is data dissemination and usage. Now, please take note of this process. Agnes and Red will show later how they facilitate it with their community leaders. The involvement of the people in this process builds their capacity for advocating for themselves, such as how they will use their data in the development and submission of project proposals. If the people are involved in the community-led M&E process, only then we can expect them to have ownership over measuring project successes, outcomes, and impacts, and therefore the sustainability of their participation in this repetitive process of issue and project development. So, what data are we focused on in community-led M&E, and what methods do we use to collect such data? The answer depends very much on the overarching evaluation questions of the community groups we support. And these evaluation questions are directly linked to their project objectives. For example, for a group in Masbate called CASAD, which also work on improving challenges in food insecurity, one objectives included is to decrease food insecurities in their community through the implementation of their rice loan. In the case of this objective, the corresponding evaluation questions can be, to what extent did our project impact food insecurity in our community? And then the corresponding data would be quantitative, because we would want to know how many of what and how frequent. As a reminder, as Nelly mentioned earlier, quantitative data are data represented numerically, including anything that can be counted or measured or given a numerical value. So as a result, we supported communities in finalizing their evaluation questions specific to these objectives. We supported them in identifying what indicators they can use to determine whether change has happened as a result of their project and in response to their evaluation questions. And then we introduced them to Kobo Toolbox. Kobo Toolbox is an online application for data collection. And then we support them in developing online surveys for easy data collection. And then we also support community leaders on how to encode surveys in Kobo Toolbox form, how to use their cell phone in data collection, and how to access reports. So we have had great success supporting communities in doing this. And recently, Kobo Toolbox also published a blog on how the women in Kasag is using Kobo Toolbox to understand food insecurities in their community better. So here are the QR codes for the article and the blog in case you want to give them a read. So, however, we are getting complacent with questions related to how many of who or how many of what or how much, how long, how frequent, etc. in collecting data that they can use, let's say, for project proposal making or for project impact evaluation and reflection. Until recently, we realized that quantitative data is not enough. And we recognize that there's a set of questions missing. What about questions around how a particular situation or intervention makes people feel? So qualitative data and methods are one approach to responding to these kinds of questions. And of course, when we say qualitative data, as Nelly mentioned again earlier, it is information that cannot be counted or measured or easily expressed using numbers, right? So we started to reflect on how we can incorporate such methods into our process. We wanted to not only draw from the typical qualitative methods and tools, but we wanted to experiment with them to identify tools that are culturally and socially relevant and appropriate for the context that we work in. We are not only curious about methods as far as data collection is concerned, our tools should also extend to the analysis part and most importantly, processes of local validation. So after analysis, it is very important that community members validate the analysis and synthesis of the data so that we have a deep agreement that analysis and synthesis reflects their situation. So the trustworthiness of the data as well as the analysis, we value this greatly. And we then identified some methods, and I want to give it back to you, Eileen, because I think before you elaborate on the method we look at and then use, I think we need to first a moment for discussion around this. Back to you,
Yes.
Eileen.
Thank you. Thank you, Nancy. Absolutely. I will continue on this, and Nancy set me up really nicely. Thank you, Nancy. But before we do that, we want to just quickly do a break and a discussion time, and we want to hear from you what kind of qualitative or quantitative methods do you feel most familiar with? Which methods are your go-to methods that you typically use, and what you have used a lot in the past and that you feel very familiar with? And you can type those responses into the chat box, or you can raise your hand, and I'm gonna Sarah, maybe you can also support me. I'm going to see if I can see raised hands so that we can see who to go to for some responses. So either in the chat box, share with us what are some of the methods that you have used, or raise your hand. So what are the methods that you have used in the past? And this is just in your work in general, right? This does not have to be in a community-led way or adjusted for community-led monitoring evaluation.
And we have
Thank
a hand raised also.
Great. And we have Luana sharing surveys, interviews. Thank you. We have a hand raised. I cannot see the hand, but go ahead.
Tila.
Thank you, Nelly.
Thank
Please
you. Can I go ahead?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for a very good presentation. I am Mishtla from Canadian Feeds the Children. We are also implementing programs using community-led approach, but what I would like to add is, like, in a community-led development, our preferable approach is to incorporate monitoring and evaluations of overall project cycle, where the planning, implementation, and monitoring and evaluation activities go hand in hand at the same time.
Yes.
So for that, we have a kind of community, we establish community groups where they sit down together and they do a kind of dialogue and discussion and reflection. So we are promoting a kind of reflection and action reflection cycles, a praxis, as we call it. So this process, as I see it, it is between a real community-led monitoring and evaluation and a conventional approach. So in community-led, as I understand, the community develops their own visions, their own goals, and the steps towards those visions. And at the same time, they set a kind of what they call baseline.
That's right.
Yeah. So they measure their progress towards that goals with our assistance and facilitation.
Fantastic.
So when I see the presentation is a bit extensive process that takes a lot of time by itself and requires, you know, some activities in addition to the implementation, or it can take place at some point in the project cycle. So how do you, I don't know how to ask the question, but is it like, is this the right way, or is this the approach, or this is something in progress towards a true or a real community-led monitoring and evaluation process?
Yep. So thank you very much for that comment. I quickly want to, and that allows for a really, really nice and a big conversation. I do want to quickly share with you the following. We do, as Nancy shared earlier, we have 3 sets of activities that we facilitate through our work: issue development, project development, and organizational development. Today, we are only sharing with you our monitoring evaluation processes linked to project development. So in other words, that's very much a little bit more time bound, because community groups implement several projects over the period of their CL journey. And so those are time bound, and they allow for, you know, the more, if I may say, traditional approach of baseline, endline, and assessing and evaluating outputs, outcomes, and impact. Okay. But then what you have shared is more sort of the procedural or the process evaluation that sort of tracks more overarching goals of the full group, of the whole group, on different sets of indicators. And we do that kind of overarching evaluation, monitoring and evaluation with the groups as well. And those indicators look a little bit different because they are more comprehensive of the overarching goals, like you also shared, of the group, right? Where is it that they see themselves at the end of their 5-year intervention? What are the things that they want to achieve? And then what is the progress toward achieving those goals? And that kind of assessment, evaluation, and monitoring, we do that too. And I'm very glad that you also picked up on the cyclical, continuous throughout evaluation and reflection that you all do. We do that too. So Nancy shared that as well, right? So it's so integral and naturalized into our process that there should be a continuous evaluate, learning, reflect, take that information, implement it again, and, you know, and that's how we transform from a learning perspective. And what Nancy has shared for us, and the reason why we wanted to share that today too, is because that perpetual learning cycle for us is also applicable to when we do community-led monitoring evaluation on the group's projects, because we want them to also then reflect and evaluate on how they are monitoring and evaluating their projects, because we want them to be consciously aware of how their skills to monitor and evaluate their projects are strengthening their capacity as a group, so that upon our exit or upon our transitioning from them when they are graduating, that they also have a set of really strong skills to continue monitoring, evaluating their projects specifically. So I hope that provides some context. Thank you very much. That was a very, very good question.
And I can just share from the chat box. We have Luana brought up surveys and interviews.
Excellent.
Kathy brought up focus group discussions, surveys, and telling stories.
Perfect.
Francis brought up surveys, interviews, and FDG.
There we go.
And we also have a hand from Barry, and I also then later saw one from Joseph, but I think we can go to Barry first.
Okay, Barry, thank you.
I'll make this very quick. No, first, this is a great presentation. I really like the way that you both take evaluation very seriously, but do that in a really community-owned way. And that's hard to do. And I think usually people emphasize one or more of those, but don't necessarily get the balance very well. I'll just add that some of us on this call actually are involved in putting together a proposal for something in Benin or Benin. And one of the things I'll just add when you ask about these particular methods is we're working with, in addition to other things, collective leadership approach, which comes from a lot of different places, but particularly from the Collective Leadership Institute based in Germany. And one of the advantages of that process is that you can measure, or maybe measure is too technical. You can evaluate the level of collaboration, of cooperation of a group. And you can do baselines and then check in with the group so that how you work as a group, whether that's a community group or whether it's partnerships between communities and NGOs or whatever it may be, there's a process by which you can really hold each other accountable and go forward with that, but at the same time be checking in very participatory ways as to how people really feel and think that they are doing as far as collaborating with each other. And that's particularly helpful in places where some are automatically going to have more power than others just by virtue of where they're coming from, what their education is, colonialism, all of those things. So I'll leave it at that. I can certainly share more about it. We've talked about that in MCLD groups before a little bit, but I'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Barry. And I would be very, very curious. Me and my colleagues at OI and also OPI would be very curious on those forms of measurements, because to your point, I think one integral objective of CLD work is to increase the collaboration among community members, right? Because we have learned through experience that increasing collaboration allows for greater social cohesion, greater social capital, all those kinds of things, which then ensure we are theorizing, and we also know through data too that can increase the sustainability of the work long term. So thank you so much for sharing that, Barry. Thank you.
And then,
yes,
if we have time, Aline, you can. I know we probably need to move on, but we have Joseph and Sarah are the last two hands that are up.
Okay, let's
if
go
there's
to
time for that.
Okay, Joseph, go ahead.
And Joseph, I muted you, so you may have to unmute again. There you go.
Hi, Joseph.
Yes. I'm fine. And they allow me to appreciate everyone here and for the training. The truth is community-led organizations have been not getting access and opportunities for grants because they've been lacking all these materials and tools.
Sure, yeah.
And in most of the cases, the donors don't deal with community-led organizations because they lack such tools. Allow me really to appreciate this initiative, this program, this training. And my request is, if it is really good, I would even hope these community-led organizations with these materials, we share with them these tools so that they can train more community organizations than we can do online here.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Okay. Yes, thank you so much. I agree with you. And I want Nancy to also chip in. I'm going to hand it over to you, Nancy. But just from my perspective, what I'm hearing from you is there's a great need to support communities to have access to data, because we know funders respond and are curious about the success of initiatives on the ground. And one way that we can support our community partners is to communicate authentically from their perspective what those changes are. And one way of doing that is if they have systematically collected data around that, and they can report, you know, about their changes. Nancy, maybe from your side too? You're muted, Nancy.
So, yeah, I agree, and that is true, and that is also why one of the process in community-led project monitoring evaluation is we also support community leaders on how they can access their data and how they can use their data to advocate for themselves. Let's say for submissions of project proposals or requests. Yeah, so that is also the reason why.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Nancy. And Nancy, we have seen so often how excited they get when they do see their data, right? And they recognize what the value of their data is.
Yeah, that's correct. Especially because we also introduce to them an application, Kobo Toolbox, and then it can show the data in a visual form, and that is very exciting for the people, because you know, people in the community more visuals, especially those who have like low level of education, but they can understand. That's a good thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the visualization component, as soon as people strengthen their capacity to visualize the data, and Kobo Toolbox is a one way of really helping through that visualization, then it becomes good. Thank you, Nancy. Nelly, we have also a question from Sarah, but I want to know from you whether we should move on, and then maybe we can return to Sarah's question at a later time.
It was actually an accidental hand raise, so we're ready to move on.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. All right, great. And we will come back to all of this. So Nancy mentioned earlier that we want to share with you a little bit what kind of methods we have chosen for our data collection, specifically when it comes to qualitative data. As you have picked up and Nancy have shared, as far as quantitative data goes, we typically use surveys, and then we use applications like Kobo Toolbox for the data collection process, and then also the visualization and report writing as far as that goes. When it comes to the qualitative data and the methods linked to that, we are very, very specifically seeking out methods that are culturally and socially relevant. The second thing, when choosing our methods, we want to make sure that those methods allow for participation, particularly participatory analysis, participatory synthesis of the data, and then also for participatory validation to check the trustworthiness of the data too. And Red and Agnes will share with you shortly how that actually what that looks like in practice. And then of course, we want to also make sure when we choose methods that they are effective and that they are appropriate ways of knowing in supporting our practice and processes. One such method that we have found to be great and that we have experimented a lot with is photo voice. So photo voice has been around for about, I think, 2 decades already. And originally the idea of photo voice is that people will take a photo in response to a particular question. So researchers would ask participants a question and then say they have to go take an image or a photo in response to that question. And then that photo will then reflect their interpretation of their world. Then as soon as they've taken that photo, they will add a description for that photo, and then the photo together with the description, that then becomes the qualitative data. The analysis side of that is that that content will then become coded. So the researchers will code it. Coding is the process of assigning shorter summary segments or summary phrases to bigger components of text. Then those codes will eventually become sorted into categories. So all the codes that are similar in type. And then those categories eventually would become themes, overarching themes that theoretically describe the response to an evaluation question. Now, we have taken that approach and we have adjusted and adapted it to become community-led. And we have realized that it can really work. Across different contexts, we've used it in Nicaragua, the Philippines, and in Cambodia. And I'm so glad that our colleagues from Cambodia is also on the call. We've used the method as is, which is we've done that in Nicaragua and the Philippines once, where we as researcher team would then work with communities and they provide the data. But we have now taken it to the participatory route and allowing for the analysis to be also participatory. And we've also experimented with community groups around not necessarily only taking photos, but perhaps drawing, if that feels better for them. And as you will hear from Agnes, community groups have also adjusted photo voice to combine it with more traditional qualitative methods, like in this case, focus group discussions. So Agnes will talk a little bit more about that, but that evolved then into a kind of mashup, which is one of our favorite things at this point, is how do we take different qualitative tools and combine them and put them together to be as best situated for us to collect data together with our community groups in response to the evaluation question. All right, I'm going to pause there because now I cannot wait to hand it over to Agnes and Red. Before doing so, I just want to pause at this slide. This is back. Nancy shared this as well. This is our community-led monitoring evaluation process, these 7 steps. We follow this together with community groups for more quantitative data collection processes in response to more quantitative questions. But this process also guides us. It provides a framework for also data collection processes linked to more qualitative questions, data, and then the methods linked to that. Okay, Agnes, handing it over to you, my friend.
Thank you so much, Eileen. Good morning, good evening, everyone. The issue we will share more with you about today is food insecurities within the rural Philippines. Nearly 51 million Filipinos face moderate or severe food insecurity in 2020 to 2022. Which is the highest number in Southeast Asia. 1 out of 10 Filipino households experience food insecurity. This is ironic, considering that the Philippines is the 8th largest rice producer in the world, accounting for 2.8% of global rice production. Yet, Philippines is projected to remain the world's top importer of rice this year. Both Santa Lucia Old and Santa Monica are experiencing food insecurities. Although these communities are one of the rice-producing areas in the province where each family could potentially have enough rice, but they don't, because most residents do not own land and rely on farm labor. All of this then makes it very obvious that people in the communities where Red and I work will surface food insecurities as one of the most pressing concerns. And just like what Ate Nancy mentioned earlier, we field practitioners work with the people in the community by facilitating the development of their identified projects as a response to the issues they want to address. And using this framework, here's what we did in Santa Monica. Step number 1, reviewing the issue and formulating the questions. Once the community decides to discuss a particular issue, we do the following. First, we do what we call groundworking. That is, visit people in the community individually. Here, we enable people to participate in an upcoming community meeting. We ensure that people can express their views and experiences regarding the issue they want to discuss. and also encourage them to share this in the general meeting activity. Then we facilitate an issue analysis and planning meeting. During this meeting, community members share their perceptions and experiences about the issue, assess it, and come up with an action plan on how to address the problem. This is also during this meeting when we facilitate with them the value of data, not only for knowing the issue in a more detailed way, but also that they can include such data in funding proposals for their projects. But to know what data, they have to formulate first what are the questions. So we then develop with them the research or evaluation questions that are most pressing to them, that will guide them, their monitoring and evaluation activities. In the case of Santa Monica, the questions they develop for better understand food insecurities are, first, what is the current situation in your community with regard to food insecurity? Second, how does food insecurity impact you as a mother and you as a family? These questions were developed during the General Assembly. There were about 83 people present during that meeting. Next is finalizing and developing data collection tool. After we develop our research questions, I introduced to the group the photo boys and asked what they think would work best. They were excited about the method and saw the possibilities of how this can really get to the data they would want to collect. They then said that taking photos is something that they would really like to do, but they decided that they want to modify the process to add workshops, or in other words, focus group discussion. And then also staging the photos so they truly reflect the discussions they would have, a kind of photo boys mass-up. Santa Monica has 5 hamlets. So the group and leaders decided that the data will be happen per hamlet. They then assign a team leader and additional 2 leaders for each hamlet who will be in charge of the data collection. They went home after the meeting, and in their respective hamlets, the assigned leaders conducted the workshop with about 4 to 6 people per group. Total participants across all the hamlets are 25. Each group was provided with materials for their workshop, and they were given enough time to complete the entire process. Step number 4 is data collection and encoding. In each of these hamlet groups, the assigned leaders then facilitated workshops in response to their overarching questions. And they did it in the following way. First is listing. They discussed the questions in their respective groups, and then they wrote down the answers to the questions that needed to be addressed. Then they brainstormed what appropriate image could illustrate their answers. Second is action planning, to collect the images. They identified what needed to be done and who would be responsible for each task, like actors, props manager, photographer, and presenters. Third is photo shoot. The actors would portray their character while being photographed. Some collected the available pictures from their gallery or from Google, and others took pictures of things, events that can be seen around. Next is photo printing and photo arrangement. When they had completed the necessary photos, they sent them for printing, and when it was returned as printed copies, they glued them in a crop paper and added captions. And aside from the captions, there were also leaders who wrote detailed explanation on separate sheet of papers that they would use as a guide on the day of presenting it. This made them ready for the presentation. All of these activities took about a week. Then all the groups came together to present, analyze, validate their data, and it was happened in step number 5, which is the data presentation and analysis. All 5 groups presented their output by showcasing their materials along with the explanations for each image they displayed. After all the presentations, it was time for a second round of analysis. As expected, there was a lot of overlapping in the data between the different groups. The participants recognized this overlap, seeing that the topics discussed in one group were also present in other groups. I then asked them to identify overarching categories that can help consolidate their different topics. They then identify these overarching categories as the following themes: food security, health, education, employment, and livelihood. The next slide shows some of the images in each theme and its impact to them. In food security, because food is not adequate for everyone, priority is given to the children, and if there's any excess, it goes to the adult. Sometimes they only eat twice a day instead of the usual 3. Others resort to cooking noodles and porridge because they are cheaper than rice, and it also feed more people and does not require additional viands. In education, some children need to help their parents do their livelihood. The money they will be using in school is being used for food instead. Of the people. This could lead to nutritional deficiencies in children, making them sick and skip attending school. And for the mothers who are constantly in charge in preparing the meals for the family, are experiencing stress and excessive worrying when food in the table is not enough. In employment and livelihood, one common strategy they do to address food shortages is borrowing from local stores, merchants, or lending institutions. However, this way further complicates their situation because they have to pay additional interest. We place these overarching themes on the wall of the meeting place, and then the different groups place their captions under each of these themes. We then ended up having a wall with 4 themes, under which was all the captions linked to the photos they took. On this slide 2, you will see on the photo displayed at the top are the 2 research questions, while on the left side of the board are the 4 themes. Along with this are the captions associated with the photos they shared during the presentation. Next step was data validation. To validate the data presented, I asked them the following. Do these categories or themes illustrate and represent the photos you presented and also the discussions you had in your workshops? I also asked them whether we missed something or if there was something that they perhaps did not discuss in their groups. They then confirmed that their discussions and images are correctly reflected in the overarching themes. We therefore validated the data as a group. Last step was data dissemination and usage. In addition to the qualitative data, the group also collected quantitative data. And last March 21st, the group used both sets of data and included it into a proposal through which they are requesting for funding for a rice loan project specifically, which they, depending on getting approval, will implement and manage themselves. Included also in their proposal is also a monitoring and evaluation section. In there, they shared with the funders that they already have baseline data on their current situation. Following the implementation of the project, they will then collect data again using the same methods they did for their baseline to illustrate the extent of their project impact. So the final slide you will see now is an overall reflections from the group about the process we did. I asked them these questions. What is now the use of the data you have collected, presented, and analyzed? How do you feel about it? And these were their responses. We are happy because we now have the data that we can use for writing the project proposal. But the images we have seen and the explanations we have heard are reflections of our current situation. That for a long time, we have been experiencing this, but we have not been given the opportunity to discuss it and find solutions together as one. We have been individually finding ways and seeking solutions. So this is the first time we have collectively discussed it. So that is the entire process we went through in Santa Monica. Now let me call Red and hear the process they did in Santa Lucia.
Thank you, Ate Agnes. Magandang gabi po sa lahat. Good evening and good morning from the Philippines. So, as Ate Agnes, following the 7-step process in community-led monitoring and evaluation, so in the community of Santa Lucia Old, we followed the same process but with some slight variation. Santa Lucia Old has the same issue in Santa Monica, which is insufficiency of rice. So following step 1, as a field practitioner, I also went groundworking for a house-to-house visit to ensure that the people will participate in a meeting discussion. Then we proceed to the issue analysis and planning as Ate Agnes discussed earlier. And after I facilitate with the people the formulation of questions for qualitative data, they identified 3 questions that will provide data in their project request as a response to the issue of rice. Question number 1, why do you need a rice loan? What is your current situation? Question number 2, what is the effect of the shortage of rice on you as mother, on your family? How do you feel when you experience this? And the question number 3, as a mother and in your family, what is the effect of the price increase of rice in the Philippines? How do you feel when you experience this? The group developed these questions during the General Assembly. There were about 80 people present. So these kind of questions primarily refers to the emotions, experiences, and actual situation of an individual in the community. It cannot be measured by quantity or amount, but through understanding the feelings, needs, and effects of issues on people's lives. The answers of these questions describe the personal experience and perspective of individuals affected by these issues. Nevertheless, how will the community answer these questions? We jump into step number 2 and 3. So during General Assembly, we introduce to them the methods of drawings. Through drawings, they can express their feelings, emotions better to answer the questions. So drawing is a quite challenge for the community members, but because they have guide questions, they become creative in thinking to answer the questions. One member of the community said they feel like they're back in school because they are thinking deeply to answer the questions through drawings. So after I facilitate the formulation of questions, the groupings were established, and this was also during the General Assembly. We divided the participants into 4 groups, each group consisting of 20 persons, and they started informally brainstorming the evaluation questions. Each group was able to identify their group leaders, and after that, they brainstormed ideas or answers to the questions, and people went home. And then in the next few days, the assigned leader and selected group of 6 to 8 people per hamlet then finalized their drawings. So producing 4 groups drawing. So this means the sample participants were 24 people. So each group provided materials in drawing, so it will be more creative and colorful. Then we proceed to the actual data collection. So that is step number 4. So the group spent almost a week doing this activity. They did their drawings in groups and individually. In the community of Santa Lucia Old, there were 4 groups who presented their drawings in General Assembly. Each group has their reporter who presented their outputs in the group workshop. Each group collected their insights, thoughts, and feelings with regards to the 3 questions that they need to answer, and the group leaders were consolidated it. Each group's answer is written on a piece of paper in full to ensure completeness and to make sure that during the presentation, the reporter will not forget any data provided by the group members. Then we jump into step number 5. So in this process, each group presented their drawings as their response to each questions in order to bring out the creativity of the community members. Each drawings that they presented, they were able to express their feelings and authentic situations. Each drawings depicts the overall details of their situation, and each group explained their drawings. They also included the analysis of their presentation. So in summary of their analysis, it is evident that their drawings targeted various aspects in education, in malnutrition, in livelihood, in economic, in emotions, and mental health. Above all, the severe impact of this issue is the deep concern of parents when mealtime arrives. They become restless, constantly worrying about where they will get food. What's worse, sometimes the spouses end up arguing due to having nothing to eat, leaving their minds unsettled in this situation. So all of these statements were confirmed and validated by all the community members. So that is step number 6. And during their presentation, you could see and feel the atmosphere in the meeting center where everyone was deeply affected by those statements. Some of them even shed tears while explaining their drawings. There are many ways to gather qualitative data, but I strongly believe that the method of drawing is one of the effective ways to bring out the true and authentic quality of data. So once the necessary data is in place, we now proceed to step number 7, the data usage. So the proposal making can now proceed. So these methods makes it easier to the community group to create their project proposal because the contents come from them directly, they validate it, and they will be the ones using this data. So writing their proposal becomes easier through this process because they have been given enough time and opportunity to explain the real situation, ensuring their proposal is not based on estimates but on a genuine and credible information. Okay, so now I would now turn over to Eileen for our next session.
That's right. Thank you so much, Red, and thank you also, Agnes. I believe, Sarah, we are now in that stage where we're going to do breakout groups, right? Nelly is not with us. It's Sarah. Sarah, you there?
Yeah.
Okay,
we
great. Are we ready? So let me quickly introduce the breakout groups. We are probably going to spend maybe no more than 10 minutes at most, Sarah, to allow enough time for discussion afterwards. So between 5 to 10 minutes, I would say, per breakout groups. In your breakout groups, we would want you to discuss the following 3 questions. Earlier, you shared some of the methods that you have used that's typically used also in monitoring evaluation actions and in processes. Those include surveys, focus groups, interviews, and so on. So we want to know from you which of those methods are more adaptable to a community-led approach. What kind of adaptations would be needed to make to them in order for them to become community-led? And then we would also like to know, have you seen any of these used in a community-led way? All right. So those would be the breakout groups. I would now hand it over to you, Sarah, to break us out. Let me just also add this. It's very interesting. Is there somebody in our Canva who's drawing these lines?
Yes, sadly, anybody could do that is the problem.
Okay.
Oh, they
All right.
might be, it might be on the Zoom, not on the Canva.
Oh, it's on the Zoom where this is happening. Okay, I thought everybody's
Yeah.
in the Canva. Yeah. Anyway, sorry
No.
about that. Okay, so Sarah's going to divide us into our breakout groups. I'm going to ask that in your breakout groups, there will be a facilitators assigned to each group. Identify in your breakout group who will be the reporter back. And then when we return back to the big group, we would just like to hear from you a summary of your discussion. And I believe it will be a facilitation happening by myself. Sarah, you will take the French speakers, and then we also have Andrea from Outreach taking a second group. Okay, so I'll see you in 5 to 10 minutes. Sarah, I'll give you a heads up when I think we are ready from our side. We can just communicate when we can all come back.
Okay, perfect. And there are so many of us that we also have a fourth group, by the way.
Oh, perfect. And who's going to facilitate that? John, is that going to be you, I believe?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you, John.
Okay, the rooms are open and our francophones are staying with me in the main room.
Okay, fantastic.
Ok, merci à vous aussi. Merci à vous aussi, Sarah.
Right. Good. Do we have everybody back? I believe so, yes? Okay, fantastic. So let's just give a brief moment for people to report back. That was a very snappy discussion session, but hopefully you got to some snappy discussions. So snappy in a good way, you know. I will quickly report back on our group. We discussed and we recognized that the methods listed there, the more traditional methods, can all lend themselves in some way to become community-led. We shared a little bit about our experiences in thinking through interview data. The one side of interview data is a phenomenal way of collecting data and perceptions, but at the same time, it produces a really big data set. And then the next step would be, okay, how do you collaboratively analyze that and have people involved in the analysis process? Another component that then came up is the importance of decision making. You know, we know very well that data collection processes, data validation things done in a community setting that has been going on for really quite some time, community-based monitoring practices. But the question we should always reflect on is, to what extent are we truly involving people in decision-making processes from the start in the CLD M&E process toward the end? What is their decision-making contribution in what methods we use and how we analyze the data and so on? And then lastly, we had two really, really good comments too about, you know, the way that we typically analyze qualitative data is through coding processes. Do we really have to do that? Are there alternatives to coding? And what kind of other way of analyzing is there that can allow for adjustments and can allow for meaningful involvement of community groups? And then I'm quickly going to call on Josephine. Josephine, because we got cut off, can you just quickly add your comment?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much again. I just wanted to say that all the methods are good, but also it depends on the community that we are dealing with. Yeah. And it depends on their level of literacy, level of education. So I'm thinking that we need to take all that into account, into consideration, depending on the communities we are working with. And I'm thinking like storytelling, like I'm from Uganda, and storytelling can be a very good approach where you can generate a lot of information, where the community continuously engages with what you're doing and actually helps you and guides and kind of paves the way, the pathway in which you generate the information and continuously use that information to inform the either project changes or development or how it actually grows. But I'm also thinking that when you look, maybe when I look at the focus group discussion, then it goes slightly maybe a different level, but still maybe it needs using like local languages, but at times people might be in communities where they don't really speak the local languages of the particular areas. So I'm just thinking all the methods are good, but there's certain things we must take into account and pick and choose so that we are able to connect to the communities and walk the path with them. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Josephine. So for me, the big takeaway from your sharing is context matters, and we must always be reflective of that. We need to always be conscious about inclusivity. To what extent are we including people in the methods that we as to collectively and collaboratively with the communities choose in our data collection processes. Thank you so much. Very valuable, Josephine. All right, maybe I'll hand it over to our next breakout group. Andrea, you ready to share?
Sure. Yes, so we got to the first two questions. There was a lot of discussion in our group, particularly about the use of photo voice, lots of interest in learning more about that as a data collection tool. So we talked a good deal about how to make that accessible, not that it's not a real tech heavy data collection method. There are lots of ways of utilizing that, both through drawing, like pen and paper drawing, or even cutting out newspapers, periodicals and things, photos that are existing that could be representative of people's experiences. But then of course also the more like smartphone taking pictures and printing, like was discussed in the session earlier. And I think there was even interest in learning more about how to implement and utilize photo voice, even trying to maybe share some more resources about that. We talked about Google being a really helpful place to just do some research and looking into that. For the second question, we also started to begin to talk more about focus groups and the value of those, hearing people's voices and stories, their own reflections. What we didn't really have time to then also discuss was, of course, the importance of, similar to what you were just reiterating, Eileen, was the importance of starting at the very beginning with the community people themselves in identifying what questions are going to be discussed in those focus groups. Because the identifying what those questions are is what will lead to the data that the community wants. And so if the community is involved in identifying what those questions are, that is a really important way in which we can make that method more community-led.
100%. That's great. Amazing. Thank you, Andrea. How about in your group, John?
Yeah, thanks. So that was interesting. Quite a few of the people commented that the work that they're involved in isn't community-led. And so it's looking at a more community-led approach to evaluation looked not very doable. There was one comment that an entry point, no matter what, could be through a community, similar to what Andrea was saying. If you do a community vision exercise first, that could make it more possible to use these community-led approaches to evaluation. But I think there was some question is, okay, is it possible to adapt this to intervention methodologies that are frankly preordained, that are not community-led?
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thanks, John. Sarah, from your group?
Yeah, from my group, Sharifa is going to share, I think maybe in French. So if everyone just makes sure they're in the English channel, Paul will translate. Sharifa, à vous.
Excusez-moi, je n'ai pas tout entendu. Qu'est-ce que je dois faire? Ah, le résumé. Donc, je vais voir ce que j'ai pris comme note. Donc, la première question qui a été posée. Donc, les deux premières interventions ont soutenu qu'il fallait privilégier ou donner plus d'importance aux discussions de groupe et même aux entretiens. Donc, il y avait aussi en anglais, je ne sais pas si ça a été bien traduit, il y avait aussi le fait de raconter les histoires, c'est-à-dire qu'au niveau local, lorsqu'il y a une histoire, on peut s'imprégner pour pouvoir avancer dans les projets. Il y a eu donc des enquêtes, et donc les enquêtes, ça n'a pas été approfondi pour savoir quelle méthode entreprendre ou bien de quelle façon il fallait s'y prendre. J'ai entendu aussi ce que j'ai inscrit ici, c'est l'approche, comment choisir l'approche ou avec qui et avec qui tenir les entretiens. Donc, je pense que cette question, peut-être que ça concernait que dans les groupes locaux, on doit s'adresser à qui en premier lieu et on doit donner plus de paroles à choisir la personne à qui donner plus de paroles. Parce que moi, j'ai écrit ici 2 personnes, mais il y avait une coupure de son ou bien l'interprète n'avait pas traduit. Donc, je ne sais pas si c'était le choix qui devait prendre 2 personnes ou bien parler au minimum à 2 personnes. Donc, il y a eu aussi le fait de privilégier aussi des prises de décision à partir de toutes ces méthodes, donc méthode, l'approche et tout ça. Et quelqu'un avait insisté sur le fait que tout ce travail doit aussi prendre en considération la collecte de données. Donc, dans le but de faire analyser quantitativement et qualitativement d'autres moyens d'analyser le processus. Donc, en dernier lieu, quelqu'un a dit que tout dépend de la communauté avec qui nous travaillons. Donc, quand je regarde le groupe de discussion, ça donne un autre niveau. Voilà. C'est-à-dire qu'il y a les discussions préliminaires, mais quand les discussions sont rapportées dans le groupe, il y a un autre niveau. Ça veut dire que les idées peut-être sont plus claires. Je ne sais pas s'il s'agit de ça. Maintenant, l'intervenante ou l'intervenant va nous le dire. Et donc, il a été dit et donc recommandé que nous devons nous assurer que nous impliquons, pas que nous nous impliquons, que nous impliquons tout le monde. Et donc, et là, quand on implique tout le monde, on peut savoir comment utiliser les moyens. Et en dernier lieu, quelqu'un a parlé des moyens audiovisuels. Il a dit que nous devons prendre des photos. Je ne sais pas s'il s'agit des groupes ou bien quand nous allons dans les communautés. Et on a parlé aussi des coupures de journaux. Peut-être que ce sont ce qui est rapporté du travail du groupe communautaire local. Et donc, coupure de journaux, photos, et donc le visuel et tout ce qui est écrit, que ce soit un article ou autre chose. C'est tout ce que j'ai pris comme note.
Thank you so much, Sharifa. Thank you for sharing.
Pardon.
Okay, good. Those are great discussions. We're running into the top of the hour.
Est-ce que j'ai été
Agnes
fidèle?
and Red still has some more to sharing with you, and they've prepared like their biggest takeaways, and I want to turn it over to them. And also with the acknowledgement that it's already very late for our colleagues in the Philippines and in Cambodia. Thank you so much for joining. We appreciate you and also staying with us through this journey. Red, I'm going to hand it back to you. Hey, are you ready?
Yes, Eileen. All right, so once again,
remember to unmute, Red.
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah, I'm clear. So
you are still muted, Red?
No.
Nope.
He's not.
He's unmuted.
He's fine.
He is?
Is
it just me not hearing?
It's you not hearing. Sorry.
Yeah, so I would like now to share my biggest takeaway from the process of the data collection of qualitative data. So first is establishing trust, building trust, within the community is paramount. When people in the community truly trust you, it becomes easier for them to express their feelings, knowledge, and experience. So this involves transparent communication and active listening. Next is adaptability. Remaining flexible and adaptable to the evolving preference of the community crucial. They are open to feedbacks and necessary adjustment just to ensure that the data collection process remains inclusive. So this means we must be adaptable too. This includes being responsive to changes in schedules, locations, or methodologies to accommodate the needs and preference of the community members. Next is empowerment through genuine participatory approaches. Genuine participation is letting them share their stories, experiences, perspective, and priorities. Involving community members from the beginning ensures that the data collection methods are culturally appropriate, relevant, and acceptable. Next is data ownership. Facilitating discussion with the community members about the findings of the data collected empowers them to identify priorities and advocate for change. It allows community members to provide input throughout the data collection process. Next is capacity building. Investing in building the capacity of the community members not only enhances their skills, but also strengthens their confidence in contributing to the data collection process. And the last is sustainability. Planning for the sustainability of community-led data collection initiative is crucial for long-term impact. So this involves identifying local resources, building partnership, and empowering leaders to continue the work beyond the initial projects. So now over to Ate Agnes to share also her takeaway and learnings about the process of this qualitative data.
Thank you so much, Red. So here's what I learned about the process we did in Santa Monica. First is embracing innovative approaches and tool for data collection and evaluation. Like in visual presentation, I saw authentic participation in explaining every picture they presented. It was very clear that they described their real experiences and situations, that they didn't just label the images casually. Instead, they connected them to actual events, circumstances, and emotions that people have encountered for so long. By doing so, they made their presentation more relatable and understandable because they anchored it in the realities. Engagement and participation. Incorporating photos into data collection methods can increase engagement and participation of the respondents. Participants may feel more involved when they are encouraged to capture visual data themselves, leading to clear and more rich and diverse data collection. Versatility and accessibility. Photos are a versatile data format that can be easily collected, shared, stored, and accessed across different platforms and devices. They can be integrated into various data collection tools and methodologies, making them accessible to a wide range of researchers and participants. Second is the importance of data analysis and validation in the process. It is an essential component in the data collection process, ensuring that data is analyzed accurately and collectively, leading for decision-making and planning for the next actions to take. Now, I will pass it on to Lynn to sum it up and share some top tips and principles. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Agnes. Can I just see, Andrea, can you give me an indication if you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. I just want to sum up here together what Agnes and Red have so beautifully shared from their perspective. From my side, there are 4 overarching tips and principles that we should go guide ourselves by. The first is always be flexible, adjustable, adaptable. Ensure that the methods that you choose are culturally appropriate, and then at the same time also responsive to local context. We are increasingly at OI and OPI and also our program partners living the principle of nothing about them without them. All practices, all decision-making processes, all activities should be completely driven and owned and be done by communities themselves. And community-led monitoring evaluation should by no means be an exception on this rule. Then I would want to encourage people, when you choose your methods, allow those decisions around which method you choose to be open to collaboration. So that should be from the design to the dissemination of your eventual data. And then lastly, throughout the whole process, ensure ownership. That is from the decision-making process, the process around decision-making, the data collection itself, analysis of it, and then finally the dissemination of that too. All right, that's all from our side. Thank you so much. I'm going to hand it back to you, Sarah.
Thank you so much. Wow. Thank you to our fantastic 4 facilitators from Outreach Philippines and Outreach International for leading such a fantastic and informative call and sticking perfectly to time. I mean, we have 1 minute, it's perfect. And a huge thank you as well to Dr. Paul Marie, who does such a good job with the French interpretation, which is truly not easy. We're so grateful. And thank you to our breakout facilitators, Andrea, John, and of course, Aline again. And to all of you who participated and gave your time to us. We hope that this was really useful, and we'll share a follow-up email with the recording and a selection of the slides in the coming days. We look forward to continuing with the Unlearning Labs with you all. And now in traditional MCLD fashion, let's all unmute and say bye to each other.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, bye,
Thank
bye.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you too. Nice time.
Bye.
Thanks and
Thanks,
goodbye.
Jude.
Bye bye all.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Sarah, how are you? This shoot.
Sarah Bulbul.
Hi,
Bye-bye.
Francis. Bye. Have a
Thank
great
you all.
afternoon.
John, everybody.
Bye, Sarah. Bye, Dr.
Jude,
John.
how are you?
Merci
I'm
beaucoup.
all right. Good.
Merci. Good to see you, Jude. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank
In
you
the
too.
Philippines, have a great evening. Thank you for staying up so late. Outreach Philippines
Thank you
team,
too.
you're the best.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm still in Nigeria as well.
Oh, you are, Jude?
I'm all right.
How long will you stay?
Well, I'll be coming maybe second week or third week of this month.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, everyone. See you again soon.
Thank you too.
Bye.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. Bye bye.
Oh, thank you, Musa. Good to see you. Bye.